FCF, it's our last day this week, and we're back in the book of Philippians. We're in chapter 4, verse 4. And the Apostle Paul starts by saying, and mind you, he wrote this book of Philippians from an incarceration type of situation. He was in a Roman imprisonment. Sounds like he had his own house, but he was still chained to a guard. It was kind of like a house arrest thing. Anyway, he starts off by saying this. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness, some translations say meekness, let your gentleness, your meekness be evident to all. The Lord is near. And then he closes by saying, rejoice always. Some versions say, I'll say it again, rejoice. It's kind of an interesting thing for we Westerners to hear something like this, because the first thing that comes to our mind is that, you feel emotions with a kind of a spontaneity that you can't just tell yourself to rejoice, and yet that is exactly what he does. He says, rejoice always. Again, I say rejoice. He does it twice. So he makes joy or rejoicing sound like it's something under the control of our will. Now, we would tend to think, well, how could he possibly be rejoicing? He's locked up. He's waiting for a decision to be made that could cost him his life. So how do you rejoice when your circumstances are less than ideal for an indefinite period of time? How do you rejoice when perhaps you're unhappy or simultaneously sad about something? In fact, let's ask that question. Is it possible to rejoice when you're perhaps sad about something else? And the answer Paul would give us is that yes, because if we really look at this, he says, rejoice in the Lord always. So this is one of these passages of Scripture that we have to say, no, wait a minute. What would I have to do in order to rejoice, first of all, in the Lord, and rejoice in the Lord always? Well, I would have to use my memory. I would have to use my mind, and I would have to look at the things that I know about the Lord. For example, I would have to reflect on the things the Lord has promised to those that are His plans, His purposes, the wonderful future that He promises for His people, the way that He's working through all things for our good, the way that even when we feel at our weakest, His Spirit is more than willing to work through us to accomplish great things that can eternally change people's lives. So my point is this, and he says this in the same passage in verse 8. He gives the Philippians, he says, when it comes to your thoughts, when it comes to your mind, he says, think on these things. And he gives them this list of items, and they're all positive. If anything is lovely, if there's any good report, if there's any truth, and so forth, he says, think on these things. So here's what I'm trying to get to. Our emotions, let's think of joy, although it's not purely an emotional state, it is certainly partially. Our emotions follow what we're thinking about. If you watch a scary movie, you're going to feel scared. You watch a funny movie, you're going to feel jolly. You're going to laugh, okay? If you walk into a room and you think everybody in the room hates you, you're going to feel uncomfortable. If you walk into the room and you think everybody loves you, you're going to feel wonderful. It doesn't matter if what you think is true or not, but what you think creates your emotional condition inside, your emotional climate. So when he says, rejoice always in the Lord, I need to use my mind to reflect about the Lord, how He loves me, how He's with me, how He'll never leave me, never forsake me, how that His kingdom is awaiting me. He's going to abolish evil someday. He's going to exalt the faithful, the godly, the righteous. He's going to reward disproportionately. So I need to reflect on these things, particularly when I'm in less than ideal circumstances for an indefinite period of time, as Paul was in jail, uncertain of what kind of a decision was going to come down. So this rejoicing in the Lord, it is a choice, though. So what Paul is saying is that all things considered, as we go through life, try to intentionally have a bent toward rejoicing. In other words, we might say it this way today, try to look for the good things, try to look for the positives, try to sensitize our sight, our minds to fixate on those things that are good, that are lovely, that are positive. What our human tendency is, and some of us more than others, myself in the past especially, and I have to wrestle with it still, is a tendency to find the one doggone irritating thing and get all bent out of shape about that, as opposed to focusing on the good things. And so Paul is saying, all things considered, it's a better state of mind, it's a better emotional climate to choose to rejoice. Find the things that you can rejoice over. And you can look at it as simplistically as this. What is a more advantageous emotional state? To be sad, to be depressed, to be pessimistic, or to be optimistic, to be upbeat, to be full of expectation, to be enthusiastic? Well, we know the answer. So Paul is simply saying, all things considered, we have a choice in this. We can always rejoice in the Lord if we reflect on the things that He's promised, purposed, planned for us, and so forth. And it's, all things considered, better for us and better for everybody else that has to interact with us if we're in a rejoicing or a joyful state of being, rather than in a somber, depressive, skeptical, cynical, angry, low-grade hostility state of being, grouchy, all those things that we can be on any given day. So maybe you're saying, Randy, it's been a lousy day today and a lousy week. All I can say is what Paul said: rejoice in the Lord always. I might have to eat these words before this day is over. I'm well aware of that, but I'm still going to try to do it. Rejoice in the Lord always. See you next week.